At this point in the development of our podcast, we were thinking that the name of the podcast was going to be Daniel in Stereo. We ran into some copyright issues, and now we have decided on the name The Guitar Lab Podcast. So you will hear that moving forward in all future episodes. But there's reference to Daniel in Stereo in this particular episode.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yep.
Hey, everybody. My name is Daniel Klein. This is my friend Daniel Seriff.
Howdy.
And we're starting a podcast. Yes, another podcast. So, Daniel, what's going to separate this podcast from the billions of other podcasts?
Well, in every episode, we're going to try and, instill some knowledge and experience of both being professional educators and performers.
Yep.
And instill that into every podcast, straight into the point, really some good knowledge for you guys.
Yep. And it's going to be pretty informal, and it's going to be quick. So our average podcast is going to be about 15 minutes, give or take. And if you don't know who this guy is next to me, Daniel Seriff, I've known you for, 12, 13 years now?
Must be 2010 or so?
Yeah. So not only is he a professional guitar player, but he's like insanely good. Someone that I look up to musically. And then also, not only as a musical practitioner, but as an educator. Like, you've got how many years of experience?
I've been teaching since roughly 2006.
Okay, so 2006. So a long, long time. And you've taught, all levels, right? Mm-hmm. And all genres?
Absolutely, yeah.
And what's your educational background for those who may not know?
Yeah, so I studied classical guitar for my undergrad, and then jazz guitar. Just got a master's in New Orleans a few years ago in that. So I've been teaching a lot.
That's great.
And then if you don't know, Daniel Klein, a great, wonderful amp builder these days, Port City Amplifiers, and gear aficionado, and hugely knowledgeable in just the realm of like music and dealing with all kinds of people in the business over the years, with both on product side as well as musically, and being involved with some of the great masters and some of our idols.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that some of the people that I look up to the most are not only friends but also use the stuff that we happen to make as a company. And before I started Port City Amps, I was a professional guitar player. And I taught professionally for 11 years. I was in a number of different bands. We were signed to Sony, toured a lot, and traveled all around. So it was a lot of fun. But eventually you get tired of riding around in a van that smells like weed, socks, and farts.
Dudes don't smell good, if you guys didn't know, especially in a small, airtight.
Yeah, in a van in Atlanta that's, when it's summertime and the AC doesn't work. It's a labor of love.
Absolutely, yeah.
But we're also going to talk about how to make it in the music business, tips on how to advance your career, pieces of gear that are invaluable, and just the overall music experience, how to talk to the manufacturers, how to get endorsements. So it's going to basically be this kind of this buffet of things that we're going to get into.
Totally.
And we promise that you will laugh and you'll learn something.
Yeah. And this is like really geared at intermediate guitarists. We kind of discussed who do we want to reach? Who are the people that we think, we could share a lot of knowledge with? And we think that intermediate guitarist is a good kind of direction to go.
Yeah. And so I remember a billion years ago when I was younger, in my early teens, just wanting to get better. Mm-hmm. And I remember several points in my kind of lineage, not lineage, but several points in my progress, I would reach these plateaus, And so as someone who's got more teaching experience than me, I'll defer to you. What are some of the best ways that not only you've broken out of ruts, but you've helped your students break out of the ruts and get out from that plateau?
Yeah, totally. I think, one of the things that in our society, it's like we lack time, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, I have to get to this next level right away. And it's like, we kind of have talked about it a little bit, and one of the best things you can do is take a day off and don't play music, or take a couple days off and listen to something fresh and new that might be inspiring to you.
for sure, for sure. I remember having that suggested to me when I was younger. I think I was 16 or 17, and they said, my teacher at the time said, hey, just listen to something that you've never listened to before. And so I picked out Miles Davis' Kind of Blue, and that album changed my life.
Yeah, that was a good suggestion.
And so I was like, wow, because the range of dynamics in the album, if you haven't listened to that album, please do yourself a favor and check it out.
Yeah,
I mean, it's got some masterful improvisation, and like it's just really, really cool. So I can't recommend that enough. But just getting kind of an inside out or outside in perspective of something that I wasn't familiar with. I wasn't familiar with that side of jazz before.
Totally.
I was still very much into the Van Halen, Joe Satriani Dream Theater type of thing.
Yeah.
And that kind of just blew my mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, when I stumbled upon that record, it was just like, oh my gosh. And I actually got to sit in on a recording session with Jimmy Cobb, the drummer.
Whoa.
I just got to watch, not play, but like sit in and we'll just watch it happen, actually at UNCG, which was crazy. But yeah, that was amazing. And just hearing the mastery of that man's brushwork is just incredible.
Yeah, that's really awesome. You'd mentioned about time. And one of the things that I learned early on is that I would get much more out of my practice routine if I established how much time I was going to dedicate, and then I would break that up. So let's say I had 45 minutes. I'd spend 5 minutes just warming up, getting my hands just where they needed to be, maybe stretching. And then I'd go, okay, I've got 40 minutes left. And then I would get files or folders that had certain things, whether it's economy picking, sweep picking, alternate picking, chord harmony, scales, things like that. And I would say, all right, I'm going to spend 20 minutes on this, then transfer 20 minutes to something else, and 20 minutes to something else. And I would always write down my goals.
Yeah.
And then also at the end of that, I'd write down what I felt, I did this, okay, I need to work on this some more.
Yeah, so like kind of your progress report for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was huge for me too. So for years and years, I've kept a practice log, just like a smaller journal, a spiral bound kind of thing. And exactly like you, I would take that and I would say, always like before the practice session, right? Because you got to plan it out, right? Because I tell my students this all the time, like, hey, you got to, write a practice log. And they're like, oh yeah, I wrote down what I did. It's like, no, you write down what you're planning to do so you have a plan and you can knock those things out. And I mean, like, I was a crazy person. So I'm kind of a heretic when it comes to kind of practice, but like I would practice stuff for 2, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, very small chunks. And I would set a little kitchen timer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that would be like my thing. And I can look back in all my practice journals. I still have them. And I can see, oh, yeah, I can do that really well. So clearly I worked on that a lot.
Sure.
And in those little chunks.
Yeah. I think doing exactly that and also recording your practice sessions, because sometimes the way we think something sounds and actually how it comes out is vastly different. Have you experienced that?
Totally. I tell all my students, like, the human, the aspiring guitarist, no human really has the mental bandwidth to know how they're sounding as they're playing. So it's like I still experience that sometimes, even though I'm much more tuned into what I'm playing. But like I record myself all the time in lessons and stuff like that, where I'm playing tracks for people and that I'm send. And it's like, oh wow, I'm playing so on top of the beat there, or like, oh man, that tone's different than I thought it was. All kind of the gamut of what it could be.
Yeah, for sure. And I will be the first one to admit this. I hate recording myself and listening to myself, but I find that pain is worth it.
Totally.
Because when you do get it right and what you thought you heard is actually on tape now, it's like, I got it. I finally got it. And it can be exhausting. And I found it extremely humbling, because, you think you're here and then you listen back and you're here and it takes you another 3 to 4 weeks to get to that level.
But you know how it sounds, and it can kind of give you that gateway to get through to that next level. I was talking to a student last week. He was just playing a simple scale exercise, but he was playing every note twice, and he kept playing the second note short. I was like, no, hold that note as long as possible. Hold it as long as possible. He's like, I can't hear that. Like, that's where you record yourself. Or nowadays, I mean, it's amazing. We can video record ourselves on our iPhones
Yes.
or Androids or whatever so easily, and it's like, because that's another thing is it's like, am I slumping? Am I is my neck all tight? And no wonder like I go to bed and my neck hurts from practicing all day.
Sure. Yeah. And one of the things that most intermediate guitar players aspire for is to be a decent session player. And that's where putting that time in beforehand of recording yourself, really listening.
Totally.
Because if you don't do that and you've got this kind of fog of like, well, I think I sound like this, and you go into a session with a producer or an engineer that just hears you and is like, this is not working,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like working on that muscle to where you're like, okay, what I think I sound like, I actually sound like. Mm-hmm. And then if there's any critiques that an engineer or producer says, or maybe it's the artist that's hiring you, is like, I want this to sound like X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. You can accurately tailor that, because you're dealing in reality.
Yeah, to kind of be able to manipulate your playing to sound the way that whatever person wants it to sound,
Yeah,
that is huge. Yeah.
How much you've done a fair amount of session work? Mm-hmm. I've done some as well, infomercials and playing on other people's CDs and whatnot. Mm-hmm. How did you get into that?
Yeah, so I think networking was kind of the biggest thing. I started playing just in a lot of bands. Probably in 2007, I started gigging.
Yeah.
Were you living in Winston at that time?
Yeah, I actually saw you at that little cafe thing off
Crankies.
of Crankies.
That's where we originally met, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was probably 2010 or 11, maybe.
Yeah, you guys would play inside and then also outside on the patio.
Oh, yeah.
I remember you guys played "All I Need" by Radiohead.
Yes.
God, that was such a great tune.
Oh, I love that song.
Is that on YouTube? Can you find it?
That one, yes.
All right, check out, what band was it at the time?
It's called the Quartet Trio.
Okay.
I think if you search Daniel Seriff,
Can we put the link in the bio?
Yeah, we can definitely put it down in the description.
Yeah.
We'll put that in there.
Yeah, 'cause I had talked to Daniel about that song a week or two before that show, and you guys pulled it out, and I was like, "Whoa, that's so cool!"
I think I actually, before I moved away to New Orleans, I had a session with those same guys in my basement, and there's several of those videos, and I think there's one more. All I Need might be the one that I haven't edited, and I need to put that out.
All right, so we'll put as many links as we can in the bio.
There we go.
So,
but yeah, so I basically started playing like 200, 250, 300 gigs a year. It was just out all the time, so I connected with all the people in town, and I was really trying to cultivate my craft. So I just started connecting, and then probably the first session work I did was with my friend Bill Stevens at Ovation Sound in Winston. And then just, like artists or just different players would be out and about, and they'd be like, hey, do you want to play on this song? And I got into recording in 2001. Uh-huh. So like I started kind of recording pretty early. So I kind of already knew things like Pro Tools and all that stuff. So yeah. So what about you for...
very much the same thing, networking. But I think I've got a kind of a unique aspect, maybe not unique, but I'm not exactly the most aggressive person when it comes to promoting myself.
Sure.
So I prefer to let other people speak on my behalf instead of me saying anything positive really or boasting, because I've just never been that type of person.
That's not you. Yes.
But networking and also just being a really good person to hang out with, not being argumentative or, stay away from politics, religion, things like that. Just be friendly, be easy to get along with, and then just be good at what you do. And then if you do that consistently, your phone will ring, you know?
Yeah.
Like for instance, I did a lot of sessions at the School of the Arts because, did you ever know Greg Sardiano?
I know that name, but I don't think I met him.
All right, so he introduced me to a lot of people there, cool. And so Greg was like, if you need a guitar track, call Daniel, and so I did a lot of that, and also some film scoring and things like that.
Yeah.
And again, if you just show up on time, you play your part, you act professional, and you really listen to what they want you to provide, they will call you back and back and back and back and back. And then normally, I would say my average session had between 2 and 6 other players,
Yeah.
whether it be a horn section, organ, vocalist, and that network grows exponentially as you continue to do that. But it's kind of one of those things that I've found that you're kind of only as good as your last session. You've got to keep the momentum. You got to keep showing up. Your gear's got to be good. Your transportation has to be good.
Yeah, you got to be there every time.
For sure, and you can't be flaky. No ego. I take what I do seriously, but I don't take myself seriously. And so I just check my ego at the door. And my first thing that I always do is I say, what do you have? And just listen.
Yeah.
And then I say, what do you want on top of this?
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll give you carte blanche and say, do whatever you want between these bars.
Totally.
And then other times they're like, all right, we're seeking kind of this arpeggiated flanger thing in the chorus.
Yeah, totally.
What do you think about that? And then they will kind of coax things out of you.
Yeah. I think leaving your ego at the door is just so important, because I've played some like wonderful stuff that I thought sounded great, and maybe even some of the people in the room thought sounded great, but the client or the producer was like, that's not the vibe. No, that's not it. So you just have to leave it and say, all right, that's cool. I'll take that home and I'll use it on my track.
Right. Totally. And I had to learn how to listen to other players because I think, you get kind of so wrapped up in practicing and listening to the nuances of your own playing, the vibrato and different tones and pick techniques, that you kind of get this little bubble around yourself. But when you're going into a session, you are just you're just the eighth train or eighth car on a train.
Totally.
And it's just one of those things where that's why listening and going, okay, what can I add to this? Not what can I push in there or shoehorn into this.
Totally, exactly.
And I've been on sessions before where there's been, maybe a keys part that comes in and, it's just really heavy, and the engineer or the producer be like, nope. I want you to just hold a chord,
Totally,
and
diamonds,
and
right?
there it is, Yeah. So again, just listening and making sure that you are not the focus of the song.
Totally.
And the song is more important than anything you could play. You are just a foundational support. You're a 2x4 on the wall.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I teach a bunch of students and I have a lot of students who have Ableton now. And I encourage them to get Ableton, and if not, just be able to play along with backing tracks and drums and things like that. Because one of the biggest things, and I'm not trying to talk junk about guitar players, but guitar players are historically arrhythmic.
Yes.
I remember was at a time where I didn't play along with things. I didn't work on my rhythm. I didn't know how. There's not always that much great instruction on the guitar for it, right? And so over the years, I've realized, the more and more I play, learning how to sense and feel rhythm and time outside of myself rather than my own internal time, as if I were playing solo guitar.
Yes.
That's the easier it is to fit. Once I sculpt that and get better at that, I can fit into any track almost.
Absolutely.
You've really feel the length of the notes and you're like, ooh, this is a little pushy, but I can sit in there and make it sound really good. Or this is really laid back. Ooh, wow, I have to really lay back my rhythm too.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree. And then also, it's been my experience, and I'm sure you can vouch for this, is that some producers will pick maybe a gospel drummer who can set behind the beat a little bit, and they're going to want you to match that. And so that's another thing, because learning to play on the beat is really important. But as you get more proficient in your playing and also in timing, you need to know how to play right on front of the beat, a little bit behind the beat.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really good drummers that have videos specifically about playing, on the beat, behind the beat, or in front of the beat.
YouTube, wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, listen to any Dennis Chambers video, and what he'll do is he'll occasionally just sink just a little bit behind it, and then he'll pick it up, but he's just such a master of going in and out of that. So it's almost like a moving tempo, just little, most people would never even get it or hear it, but it's so invaluable to the feel of the tune. And when other people in the band or the session can dig into that, dude, that's magic.
Yeah, and that's actually been my experience playing in a lot of bands and just live, is that You know when you're really gelling when everyone's consistently nailing the groove in a certain way.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of us aspire to, be better rhythmically and stuff, and we've experienced kind of like, all right, like, why is this song rushing all the time, or why is it dragging? And it's not always like the drummer's responsibility. It's our responsibility. It's a whole band's responsibility.
Sure.
Same with bass. It's like, it's so funny. People talk junk about bass players all the time, but they're like the most important person in the band.
Absolutely. Yes.
You have a bass player who's not holding their own, and it's like, oh wow, this is falling apart.
Yeah, it's hollow. It's like it feels like the songs or the tunes going into like this black hole with no foundation.
Exactly. And or if they're waiting to play the bass note as the correct one until after beat one, it's like, well, as guitar players, we have this luxury where it's like I can kind of like, if I'm on a gig and I don't know a tune, they can call it and I can be like, oh, it's the 4.
Yes.
And I have like this like beat and a half or beat to get the right chord changes.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, so I think there's some good suggestions. Taking some time off if you're in a rut.
Absolutely.
Listening to something new. I think playing with others is really important.
Totally.
Even if it's just going down to a local bar or something, then there's an open mic jam.
Yeah, like a jam session kind of thing.
And that's a perfect opportunity to work on your listening, work on your timing, work on your people skills and your networking.
Yeah.
And also, let's say, you've maybe not dialed in a sound yet, or you think you've dialed in a sound, but now you've got to incorporate your sound with maybe an organ player.
Yeah, totally.
You might have to be like, okay, there's a little bit too much low mid in the entire mix.
Yeah.
So let me do that. And that's another thing that a lot of producers or session, engineers are going to look for. They're going to maybe give you the opportunity to kind of sculpt your own sound.
Totally.
And you need to know if there's a horn section, like, okay,
How
there's
do I
certain
fit it in the
frequencies that
mix?
you don't want to step on.
Right, totally, yeah. I think that, we could probably do an entire episode on jam session etiquette. Maybe that should be episode 2, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you all have any episode suggestions, anything that you want to know about, we would love to hear it. As someone who owns an amplifier company, Port City Amps, we can talk about endorsements and how to get that. And also, we'll talk about gear, speakers, pedals, cables, picks, heads, and it's not going to be all Port City. It's going to be, all this stuff is amazing behind us, and we can talk about that too.
Yeah, all things guitar. So we would love your feedback. If you guys have any ideas for, any episodes, we would love to hear that, and we can grow the channel in that direction.
Sure. And speaking of getting better, you've got some courses.
I do, yeah. So I have this diagonal pentatonic method that kind of changed the way I play guitar. I started teaching it in my private lessons, and eventually
Daniel was kind enough to give me a copy of that, and it is amazing. I learned something, and I think that's really cool. I love picking up new stuff, and the way that it's laid out, not only visually, but also just how you break things down, I think is really masterful. And I think it's really perfect for the intermediate to upper intermediate guitar player.
Yeah, I kind of, say that it's a lot about, we learn scales and our kind of box patterns, and this is one of those things that kind of gets you out of that, and it instantly sounds more musical. And then also there are a lot of exercises in there to really try and make the sounds that you hear in your head come out on the guitar. Just have, rather than playing scales. That's the thing is, guitar players, we get stuck in like, I go to improvise and I sound like I'm playing scales.
Right. And as someone who, let's see, we've got close to 30 years of teaching experience between the two. And so you can go out, and when I hear someone, I'm always looking for the good, no matter what level they're at. But
totally.
I can hear when someone's really got a scale down because they make it their own.
Yeah.
It's not so linear.
Totally, yeah. You can bounce around as you please to get the sounds that you're looking for.
Exactly. So where can they get that course?
That's on my website. We'll link below, www.danielseriff.com.
Yep. And is there a promotional code that you're wanting to use?
Yes, there is. So our podcast is called Daniel in Stereo.
Yep.
We'll use that as the promo code. Also, there will be a link down below as well. We'll give them 40% off.
Oh, sweet. That's great. And is that just a download where they can just...
Yeah, so it's you have 24/7 access. You just download it. It's on my website, and yeah.
Okay.
Have it for life.
And how can people get in touch with you in case they have some questions about that?
You could go check out my website, or we'll be monitoring the comments on this video. So if you want to comment below, ask any questions, we're happy to help.
Cool. All right, folks, we're out of time. We told you we were going to make it quick, informal, and fun. I think we've done that. We really appreciate you sticking around. And please like and subscribe, leave a comment. Anything else?
Yeah, that's great. Looking forward to the next one.
Daniel in Stereo. See you, buddy.
See you guys.